Jake had always lived a quiet life, keeping his world small and simple. At 41, he worked long hours as a mechanic in a local garage, raising his 9-year-old son, Ethan, alone after his wife had passed away years before. The one constant joy in his life, aside from Ethan, was Max, a loyal German shepherd who had grown from a playful pup into a guardian of their family. Every evening after dinner, Jake would leash Max and take him for a walk through the neighborhood, using the time to clear his head and breathe after long days of grease and machinery. On one particular chilly evening, as autumn leaves crunched beneath their feet, Jake could not have predicted that his ordinary walk would turn into something that would change his life forever. They turned down a narrow side street, the kind of place Jake usually avoided because of its emptiness. But Max tugged insistently at the leash, ears perked and tail rigid. Jake frowned, sensing his dog's unease. The air felt heavy, the stillness broken only by the distant hum of traffic. Suddenly, Max barked sharply and lunged forward toward the shadows near an abandoned parking lot. Jake followed, heart pounding, and that's when he saw her. A young woman lay sprawled on the ground, her police uniform stained with blood. She looked no older than 32. Her short hair matted, her breaths shallow and labored. For a moment Jake froze, the shock hitting him, but then instinct took over. He ran to her side, kneeling down in the gravel, his hands already reaching for her wound. Her voice was faint, almost a whisper, as she tried to speak. "Please, don't let me—" Her words trailed off in a pained groan, and Jake hushed her gently, his own hands trembling as he pressed his jacket against the wound in her side. "Stay with me, you're not alone," he murmured, his voice both firm and compassionate. The officer's eyes fluttered open, glazed with fear, and for a second she seemed startled that it wasn't a fellow cop by her side, but a stranger. Still, Jake's steady presence and calm tone gave her something to hold on to. He yelled for help, but the street was deserted, no cars, no people passing by. It was just him, Max, and a woman who was slipping further away with every second. Jake reached for his phone with one hand, his other keeping pressure on the wound. He dialed 911, his voice strained but clear as he gave their location. The operator asked if the victim was breathing, and Jake described her shallow breaths, saying over and over, "She's going to make it. I'm not letting her go." While he spoke, Max stood protectively near them, his teeth bared, ears alert at every sound from the shadows. Jake didn't know who had done this to her, but he felt the danger hadn't entirely passed, and the thought of Ethan back home without a father, if something happened to him, made him even more determined to stay vigilant. The operator promised an ambulance and police backup were on the way, but Jake knew that in situations like this, every minute mattered. The officer tried to move, but Jake pressed her gently back down. "Don't waste your energy. Just focus on my voice." He told her his name, told her about Max, even mentioned Ethan, trying to keep her anchored to the world. Her lips trembled, as if she wanted to speak, but no words came. Jake could see the pain etched across her face, yet also the fight she still had left. He prayed silently for strength, for her survival, even though he hadn't prayed in years. It felt strange, but in that moment, kneeling on the cold pavement with blood seeping through his jacket, Jake believed there had to be something bigger than both of them keeping her alive. The sound of distant sirens finally reached his ears, but they were faint, still blocks away. Jake's heart raced, his body tense with the fear that she wouldn't hold out long enough. He spoke to her, his voice firm, commanding, refusing to let her give up. "You're strong, you hear me? You're not leaving this fight. Think about your family, your friends. They need you." Her eyes locked onto his for a brief moment, and he swore he saw a flicker of determination in them. Max barked again, louder this time, his body rigid, scanning the darkness. Jake tightened his grip on the jacket, pressing harder against the wound, whispering encouragement as her breathing came in uneven gasps. Minutes stretched like hours, each second marked by the struggle of keeping her conscious, of keeping himself calm despite the blood on his hands. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, not just for her life, but for what it would mean if she didn't make it. She wasn't just a stranger. She was someone's daughter, someone's friend, someone who had dedicated her life to protecting others. Jake thought of Ethan, imagined what it would feel like if it were his son lying hurt and helpless, and that thought gave him a surge of determination. He leaned closer, his voice low and steady. "I'm not letting go. You're going to make it. Stay with me." Finally, red and blue lights flashed against the buildings as squad cars pulled up, followed closely by an ambulance. Relief washed over Jake, though his hands never left her wound until paramedics took over. Police officers rushed forward, shocked to find one of their own in such a state, but equally stunned to see a civilian, a single dad with his dog, holding her life together by sheer willpower. The paramedics praised Jake for his quick action, saying without it she wouldn't have survived until they arrived. As they lifted her onto the stretcher, her hand brushed against Jake's weakly, a silent thank you in her fading consciousness. Jake sat back on the pavement, exhausted, his clothes stained with blood, his body trembling from adrenaline. Max pressed close against him, sensing his fatigue, and Jake reached out to stroke the dog's fur with shaking hands. Around him, police and medics moved quickly, but for a moment it was just him, Max, and the realization of what had just happened. He had walked out for an ordinary night, and somehow fate had placed him in the right place at the right time to save a life. As the ambulance pulled away, Jake looked at Max and whispered, "We did the right thing, buddy." He had no idea that this act of courage would soon echo far beyond that dark parking lot. The next morning, Jake woke up feeling the weight of the previous night pressing on his shoulders. His hand still ached from holding pressure on the officer's wound, and the image of her pale face, fighting for life, haunted him. Ethan had asked why his dad had come home so late, and why his jacket smelled like iron and antiseptic, but Jake had simply told him he helped someone who was hurt. Deep down, though, he knew it was bigger than that. He had crossed paths with someone whose survival depended entirely on him, and that reality was hard to shake. By mid-morning, there was a knock at his door. Jake opened it to find two uniformed police officers standing on his porch. For a moment, his chest tightened, wondering if something had gone wrong, but instead they introduced themselves politely and thanked him for what he had done. They explained that the woman he had saved was Officer Claire Thompson, a decorated member of the local police force, and that she was still in critical condition, but alive because of his actions. Jake felt a strange mix of relief and unease. He hadn't done it for recognition, but hearing her name made her feel more real, more human, not just a bleeding stranger in the dark. The officers invited him to the hospital if he wanted to check on her, and though Jake hesitated, wondering if it was even his place, Ethan urged him to go. "Dad, you always tell me heroes don't just walk away," Ethan said with a small but determined look. Jake chuckled softly, ruffled his son's hair, and decided to go. He brought Max along, sensing the dog had played as big a role as he had in saving Claire's life. They drove quietly through the city, Jake's mind turning over questions he couldn't answer. Who had attacked her? Why was she left for dead? And what would happen now that he was part of her story? At the hospital, Jake was led through sterile halls until he reached Claire's room. She lay hooked to machines, her breathing steadier but her body pale and fragile. For a moment, Jake stood in the doorway, unsure if he belonged there, until one of the nurses nodded encouragingly. He stepped closer, Max padding silently at his side. Claire's eyes fluttered open, and when they focused on him, a faint smile tugged at her lips. Her voice was weak but clearer than the night before. "You're the mechanic." With the dog, Jake gave a quiet laugh and nodded. "That's me." "Name's Jake, this here's Max." She tried to raise her hand, and Jake instinctively reached out, gently clasping it. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes glistening. "If you hadn't been there—" Her words broke, but Jake shook his head. "Don't thank me. You did the hard part, staying alive." Claire chuckled softly despite the pain, and for a moment the room felt lighter. Jake stayed a while longer, talking quietly, telling her about Max and Ethan, anything to distract her from the discomfort. She listened intently, her grip never leaving his, as though drawing strength from his calm. When he finally left, Claire's expression lingered in his mind, a mixture of gratitude, strength, and something deeper that unsettled and intrigued him. Over the next week, Jake visited often. He and Ethan would bring flowers, or sometimes just sit with Claire so she wouldn't feel alone. Max became something of a therapy dog for her, his gentle presence easing her anxiety as she processed the trauma. Slowly, Claire opened up about that night. She revealed she'd been investigating a drug trafficking ring when she was ambushed. Her radio had been destroyed, and she had been left in that parking lot to die. Jake felt a cold chill at her words. The thought of her sacrifice, of how close she had come to being forgotten, filled him with anger but also admiration. The more time Jake spent with her, the more he felt his walls slowly crumble. For years, he had lived only for Ethan and the garage, avoiding attachments or emotions that might hurt him again. But Claire was different. She was brave, vulnerable, and unafraid to speak honestly, even about her fears. She told him how hard it was to wake up each day in uniform, never knowing if it might be her last, and Jake found himself listening with a kind of respect that bordered on awe. For the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving, he was connecting. Word spread quickly through the police department about what Jake had done, and one afternoon, the police chief himself showed up at the garage. He presented Jake with a commendation letter, thanking him for his heroism. Jake felt uncomfortable with the attention, but Ethan beamed with pride, telling anyone who would listen that his dad saved a real cop's life. Jake smiled at his son's enthusiasm, realizing maybe being recognized wasn't about him. It was about showing Ethan what it meant to step up when it mattered. And in a way, it was about showing Claire she hadn't been left to fight alone. As Claire recovered, she visited Jake and Ethan at their home. She even joined them on walks with Max, laughing at how protective the dog remained around her, almost as if he remembered every detail of that night. Their bond grew naturally, without force, rooted in respect and gratitude. Jake found himself looking forward to her visits, her laugh filling the quiet spaces of his life he hadn't realized were empty. Ethan adored her too, often asking if Officer Claire could stay for dinner. Each time, Jake caught Claire's eyes across the table, and something unspoken passed between them. What began as a chance encounter born from tragedy slowly transformed into something more profound. Jake had saved Claire's life, but in return, she had given him back something he thought was gone forever. Hope. Hope for love, for companionship, for a future where his world wasn't just about survival. Claire, too, found herself healing, not just physically but emotionally, finding strength in Jake's unwavering steadiness and Ethan's innocent joy. By the time she returned to active duty, their lives were forever intertwined. The police force often spoke about bravery in the line of duty, but word spread through the department about the night a single dad and his loyal dog had stepped in when no one else was there. It became a story told with reverence, a reminder that heroes sometimes come from the most unexpected places. For Jake, it wasn't about being a hero. It was about being there when someone needed him most. And as he walked home one evening with Max trotting proudly at his side and Claire's laughter echoing behind him with Ethan, Jake realized that night had changed more than just one life. It had changed all of theirs forever.